Hey everybody, YouTube crowd. Doing a little bit of an early stream today, and we're talking about sentience. Is the sun sentient? Now, I guess in order to cover this well, we'll have to sort of talk about the distinction between sentience and consciousness. But sentience, to make a long story short, is the ability to feel. So there's a huge rift between sentience and consciousness, obviously, and that could be the point of debate. But it's okay if we discuss if the sun is conscience, sentience. Either thing would be an interesting development, right? So that's what we're talking about. Now you're going to hear a terrifying sound, and it is not the sound of pee. It is the sound of my coffee maker filling, so you don't have to worry about that because you can see that I'm not peeing. So, so anyway, yeah, and this is an interesting topic because just because the ancients believed the sun was conscious and sentient and a god and whatever, well, that doesn't make it true, does it? The ancients believed a lot of things that were sort of later determined to be dubious at best. Dubious at best. So now, in determining whether or not the sun is sentient, one would have to, first of all, figure out a way to determine if the sun is able to feel. Like, how are you going to do that? And my friend Eugene the Philosopher, he does have a YouTube channel as well, Eugene the Philosopher, Philostopher. He suggested that maybe the sun would be unable to perceive us because stars operate on time scales in the billions of years, right? And so if stars operate in time scales in the billions of years, then it's going to be pretty tough for stars to perceive us, right? We would be moving so fast that we would look like an imperceptible flash of nothingness. So there's that. So that, that could be a real obstacle there in terms of humans' ability to determine if the sun is sentient. It would be easier to determine if the sun were conscious, right? Because if the sun were conscious, then perhaps we would be able to send a communicade, right? If you were a star, right? What would your friends be like? What would your family be like? What would your neighborhood be like? Well, see galaxies for details, but obviously you would be communicating with each other via light and particles. So how would that work exactly? Cosmic rays and X-rays, maybe? Cosmic rays and some kind of radio frequency, maybe the hydrogen output or something like that, maybe the helium output, maybe the whole spectra is the form of communication between stars. Maybe they're talking to each other and they're sending slow messages via particles and faster messages via light, but it takes them, years to communicate with each other, even with the closest stars if they're using light. So, that would be an indication that if they're having a conversation, it's on a very lengthy time scale, right? So imagine if it took one year, if it imagine if it took 4 years, it takes about 4 years for light to get to Alpha Centauri, right? It's 4 light years away. So imagine if it took 4 years for you to hear the words coming out of my mouth, right? If your form of communication is some kind of light and it's got to travel 4 light years, it takes 4 years for the communicate to get there. So, so there's that. Um, yeah. So this is just going to be a short stream just to briefly talk about this, because you know, people will say, "Oh, the ancients, the ancients used to believe that the sun was a god or a goddess or whatever," and oh, cave paintings depicted a thing. Like, yeah, okay, the ancients might have believed, they might have believed that Hammurabi had two buttholes, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the ancients believed. Uh, the ancients assumed things. I mean, it's kind of logical that the ancients would think the sun is a god. They knew it was associated with, you know, growing plants. Hey, thanks viewers for leaving comments. Some comments we even read on the stream. So, yeah, is the sun conscious? Is the sun sentient? Can the sun feel and can the sun think? Does the sun have intention? Once again, if so, I would say, how would we measure? How would we figure that out? What kind of communication would you do? Would you expect the sun to just leave a YouTube comment? I don't think the sun would be able to leave a YouTube comment because I don't know how it would operate the apparatus. Maybe the sun has its own smartphone, but I don't know how it would really run the smartphone, right? So that's like the same as just talking to you in English or whatever language, right? How would you communicate with a star? Their lifespan is in the billions of years, and they're talking to other stars via light and particle transmissions. They're blasting particles out through space all the time. What if the solar sunspot cycle is basically just the sun's mood? What if that's the sun's mood? What if that's the most basic, like, emotional functions of the sun? That the sun isn't even aware of the solar cycles. It's just kind of, because 11-year cycles. If your life takes billions of years, right? Are you even going to be able to perceive an 11-year period or a human lifetime when your lifetime is measured in billions of years? How would you relate? So maybe you've got some like incredible way of relating. And speaking of relating, if you leave comments on YouTube live streams, you may want to keep the advice uh, inside your head. Keep your advice inside your head, because that way, when your feet are in your mouth, as they often are, your feet in your mouth can block that nonsense from coming out of your mouth, or in this case, out of your keyboard. So there's that. So yeah, I just wanted to briefly rant about sentience and whether or not the sun's sentience. I mean, it would be interesting, right, if all stars were just constantly communicating with each other, and maybe that's what the weird X-ray emissions that are always going on are, right? Maybe sunspots are a means by which stars are sending communiques to each other. Maybe that's what an X-ray flare is. Maybe that's a conversation. Maybe that's some kind of exchange of info between stars, right? So anyway, I just figured I would briefly rant about that and ignore all of these silly comments that we have so far. If you have a smart comment or something relevant to say, then maybe we'll actually read it or something like that. But if you have idiotic comments, then just keep those in here. Keep your feet in your mouth where they belong, and never the twain shall meet. Uh, What does it say? Holla. Uh, so we will do another stream a little bit later about space weather, and that's why I started talking about the sun, because space weather is that's another solar feature, right? So is the sun having a communication with Earth? Maybe. Is the sun having a communication with you? Does the sun leave comments on your YouTube channel? Let us know in the comments if so. Bubbles, what do you think? Ricky, is the sun sentient? Is it conscious? Bubbles is shaking his head. And James T. Kirk, what's your thoughts? James T. Kirk